Hi everybody and welcome. We've got a panel together today for you to answer your questions about training in the East Midlands region in the hospitals and in the multi-sector placements, and this is to help you decide whether you'd like to preference any of the trusts in this region through the National Recruitment Scheme, or ORIAL as it's called. So throughout the next hour we're going to answer questions on the main elements of the regional training. So this will include the on-the-job training in each of the hospitals, the clinical seminars and the regional programme as well. In this session, we're not able to answer any questions around the ORIAL process itself, such as how to prepare for the SJT test. So I apologise for that. We will be ignoring any questions around that. But your university will be able to support you, and you'll be able to go onto the National Recruitment website to get some more information, and that's on screen now. So first of all, I'd like to introduce our panel, and then we'll get on with the questions. So we'll start with Hannah. Hannah Hussain is currently a pre-registration pharmacist at University Hospitals of Leicester. She just started in August, and she also blogs about her experiences as pharma drama on Instagram. So thank you, Hannah. We've also got some of the provisionally registered pharmacists who were pre-regs last year. We've got Johnny from Chesterfield, Lucy from Nottingham University Hospitals, and we're hoping to have Hannah as well, another Hannah, who did a multi-sector place with Kettering General Hospital and one of the GP practices. And then finally, we've got several of our pre-registration training facilitators who are like our senior tutors. We've got Sophia from Derby, Kate from the Lincolnshire Hospitals, and Sandy from Sherwood Forest Hospitals. Hi. And finally, I'm Amanda Kemp. I lead the regional training programme, which is run through De Montfort University, and that supports the training that happens in all of these hospitals. So we've got a lot of questions to get through. We've got over 100 people listening, so we'll get on with that now. So the first question we've been asked was, what sort of rotations can I expect from a hospital pre-reg? Does it include ward-based training, and how long do you spend in areas like aseptics? So I'm going to ask Sandy to start us off with that one.
Okay, thank you, and welcome to this live chat. As regards trying to answer this question, I think I'll try and talk generally about what you might expect to see in region. So most hospitals will have dispensaries, medicines information departments, possibly aseptic units, and obviously definitely wards. So those sort of rotations would be things that you would expect to see during your pre-reg year. Hopefully people are aware that as it stands at the present, GPHC has various performance standards that you need to achieve during the year. So you'll find that most rotations and most programmes will actually give you sufficient time in each of the areas to actually achieve the GPHC's performance standards. But what I would say, because obviously it is a hospital, you are going to see sort of a reasonable and generous proportion of time being given towards wards and clinical training. Obviously, the actual specifics that you see does depend on the trust that we're talking about. We've got a variety of different trusts in this region. They cover different specialities. They're also different sizes. Some are more sort of district general, some are actually acute, sort of larger teaching hospitals. So what I would say is to signpost you actually to a couple of websites that we've got, and hopefully they'll come on screen in a little time. And they actually, if you go to those websites, they've got more specific details actually about the trusts in regions and actually the programmes that are there. What I would suggest, if you are particularly interested in the trust, is perhaps actually contacting that trust in its own right, and they can probably give you a little bit more detail about specifically the rotations that you would see in that area.
Okay, thanks very much, Sandy. Okay. So I think the message there is to contact each of the trusts to find out more information. And I think a lot of the trusts will, they will send you out a sample rota so you can see what is covered. in each of those places. So thank you for that. We received a few questions in advance about what are the employment conditions. So I think if we can get that out of the way, because that's quite similar for each of the hospitals. I was going to ask Kate to answer that one.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So employment conditions, the salary, which I think is one of the important bits that you'll be interested in, it's as per agenda for change, and it's band 5, which for April 2020 was approximately £24,907. Annual leave is generally the same, so it's 25 days a year plus your 8 bank holidays. Whether or not you have to work your bank holidays is up to each individual trust, and everyone does very different things, so it's worth asking those questions of the trust you're interested in. In terms of late duties and weekend working, again, it's very different per trust. Some trusts will ask you to work late shifts, some won't. Equally, some will ask you to work weekends, and others will as a voluntary basis. So again, if you are particularly interested in a trust, contact them, ask those questions. Everyone is more than happy to answer those questions as needed.
Excellent, thank you. And just a bit of a sub question, we did receive a question about anyone expected to work night shifts, sort of overnight.
That's certainly not one we've particularly asked anyone to do, and I don't think any of my colleagues have ever asked anyone to work a night shift, so I'd really be unusual for a pre-registration student to work one of those.
I think that comes once you're qualified. Okay then.
If I could come in there and just say that at Derby we do get them to shadow a night shift for experience if they choose to, so there is the opportunity if they want to, but it's not a mandatory part, they're not working, it's just for training.
Yeah, oh, that's a good.
Yeah, I was going to echo exactly the same, Amanda, so yeah.
Excellent.
An option for training, but not expected as part of the contract.
Excellent, thank you. Sophia, could you answer the next question then about travel expenses and study leave?
Yeah, so somebody's asked, will we get travel expenses and study leave? So travel expenses first. This is another thing that might vary between trusts. So if we're talking about travel expenses to come to work from your home, I think I can across the board say that no, you won't get travel expenses for that sort of thing. But if we're talking about going for seminars in your region or the regional training days when they're actually going to be hosted face to face again, then that is something to speak to the individual trusts about to find out if your trust that you're interested in does do some expenses to cover for that. And then study leave separately. So it is given to attend the sort of mandatory training part of your course. So if it's clinical seminars either within your hospital or outside of in another hospital in the region, then yes, you will be given it. And also for the regional training days, you won't be expected to book annual leave. You will just get to go to those for free as such. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that as well that some of the hospitals will give you a bit of time to do the rotation workbooks, for example, any questions you're expected to answer, but we don't generally give you leave to just go and do whatever study you want, because the GPHC expects you to be in the workplace and learning. Okay. Was also asked about on-site accommodation. Is that available? And I believe that is available at all 8 of the hospitals that we have in the region. And again, contact the individual hospitals to get details of that. I think it's particularly new and swanky at Sherwood Forest, but I believe it's very good at all of the other hospitals as well. So we'll move on to some more questions now around how to choose which hospital to put down. And what order to put them in. So the next question then is how to decide how to preference. And I was going to go to Hannah as a pre-reg who went through this most recently, just sort of what factors you think people should consider.
Yeah, so hi, and as Amanda said, I just did my Oriel preferencing last year, so it's quite fresh in my head. So the first thing, which I think everyone considers, is location. For a lot of people, they usually pick where they're from. so you can save money in that way, so that's good. Another thing to consider is the size of the hospitals or the trust. So you can get quite small hospitals, like district hospitals, and you can get larger ones, and you can get teaching hospitals, which are usually larger as well. So for example, I'm at the Leicester Hospital Trust, and we have 3 hospitals in our trust, so we do a rotation across all 3. And the benefit of this is that I can experience what it's like to be in a large hospital and in a smaller one, and there are differences. So it's definitely something to look into. Another thing is looking at what rotations and specialities are offered. So if you know what kind of pharmacy or what kind of pharmacist you want to be and what kind of speciality you want to go into, for example, mental health, and that's definitely something to look into as well when you're looking at the different trusts and hospitals. Also looking at the career prospects and what kind of support is available at the hospitals, that's also really important. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on one of your points there then, which was about whether you should choose a larger or a smaller hospital, and perhaps ask Lucy first, who's at another one of the larger hospitals at Nottingham, and then Johnny, who's at one of the sort of medium-sized hospitals at Chesterfield, what they think about that question. So Lucy first.
Hi everyone, so I'm currently working at Nottingham Hospitals. So I did my pre-registration year at City Hospital. So although we have a Nottingham Hospital Trust, for your pre-reg year you're allocated one of the hospitals, but they're both still very large hospitals to work in. And I do think it is a complete personal preference for this. It may be depending on what you would prefer. I don't think there's one that's better than the other. It does just depend on what you're looking for. So with larger hospitals, obviously there is more staff, so there's more people to meet. So this can be a good thing because you're constantly meeting new people, but then you do maybe move around more as well. So it can be up to you. But as I did my pre-reg year at City Hospital and just based in one, that sort of felt like a smaller hospital in terms of introducing yourself to the workplace. So even if you go to a large trust, they will ease you in. So I found that by working just at one hospital for the year, I sort of settled in really well. And now that I will be rotating between both sites, I feel quite prepared for that. And obviously we have a range of specialities across both sites, so there's lots of different things to experience. And you do sort of rotate. So say if one of the hospitals only has one specialty, you will get the opportunity to go and see that as well. So I do think there's lots to see in a large hospital and lots to learn, and it can be quite busy. But I do think this is a bit of a personal preference depending on what you're looking for. I think John will agree as well with what you're looking for in a trust.
Yeah, so I'll hand over to Johnny, who's at Chesterfield, and see if you agree with those comments. Anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. It is personal preference what you want from it, really. Whether you want to go to a bigger hospital or a smaller hospital. I'd say whilst Chesterfield is probably a smaller one in the region, we still are very busy and we do only have one site, but we offer still quite a lot. You get to see, most of the rotations you need, you get to see everything you need for your outcomes. And, and whilst we may not have some of the more acute specialities, it doesn't mean that those patients don't appear on the ward. So, you get the opportunity to see a wide variety of different patients, and, it is still bigger. So it is a personal preference, really, as to what you prefer. But I'd say coming to a smaller trust, you definitely don't miss out on anything, and you see enough to be able to, definitely for knowledge and experience as a pre-reg.
Excellent, thank you. And I would say all 8 hospitals give excellent grounding in all the different areas that you need to know about as a pre-reg. I just wanted to make one final point, though, that people seem to think that a teaching hospital, because it's called a teaching hospital, is better in some way. All that means is that it's affiliated with a medical school, and as a result we'll have medical students in that hospital. But actually these days we have medical students in all of the hospitals, so it makes no difference whatsoever to the quality of your pharmacy teaching as to whether it's called a teaching hospital or not. So don't let that influence your decision. Okay, what's in a name? All right. I just need to check. Do we have the other Hannah with us yet? No. Okay. She's having a few technical difficulties, so I'll come back to that one when she comes on, because she did a multi-sector placement. So we'll come back to that question when Hannah is here. Otherwise, we'll come back to it at the end. So the next question was about a cross-sector placement. We had some people wanting to know whether they'd be able to spend some time in community whilst they're doing their hospital training. I was going to ask Lucy again to answer that one.
Hi everyone. So it's not mandatory that you need to do a cross-sector placement. You don't have to spend any time in another sector, but a lot of trusts do offer time to spend, say, 2 weeks in a community pharmacy. I know at Nottingham, so for our cross-sector placement, there's 3 weeks where you spend it in the outpatient pharmacy. So our outpatient pharmacy is outsourced. So this is where you see things like emergency contraceptive consultations, you get your OTC practice in, and sort of see it from the more community side. So it can be quite good for revision, but it's not mandatory to do. So get into contact with all the trusts, because I'm sure they'll tell you more about what they offer. But we did spend 3 weeks at Trust Outpatient Pharmacy getting that cross-sector experience in.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucy. And that leads us on a bit to the next section of what we're going to talk about, which is the regional training, because in addition to the training that happens at the hospitals, the pre-regs also have some sort of regional sessions that we do some teaching in. And I've been asked, what does that cover? So mainly this is it's either classroom based or on a virtual platform like this, depending on whether we have COVID at the moment or not. And what we're trying to do is complement what happens in the workplace to give you those personal and professional skills to complement what you're learning there. So for example, we'll cover things like communication skills and consultation skills. We'll talk about ethical topics, so anything that's good to discuss in a group, sort of ethics, professionalism, that sort of thing we'll cover. Also some of the more practical things like first aid training. We'll cover community topics, because the exam at the end of the pre-registration year is a generic exam, so we need to cover the community aspects as well. And we will offer a practice paper or practice exam towards the end of the year in addition, and that will be a full length one. Something that is unique to our region in the regional training is the simulation suite training, and this is where pre-regs have the opportunity to join in with medics and nurses in a simulation suite where we look at acute scenarios. We give you a lot of support for that, but the main aim about that is to learn how other professions work and think, and to think around the sort of situational issues of working in a pressured environment, so situational awareness and people factors. And I think that's something that the pre-regs have found of great value. Johnny, I don't know, did you go on one of those with Chesterfield?
I was due to, but unfortunately because of COVID, mine didn't go ahead because it was later. But I know the 2 previous pre-regs we had last year, Pavin and Eleanor, both said that whilst you were put into some, not I wouldn't say challenging scenarios, but from what they said, that you are put into scenarios you would see on the job, and it's good for getting to know how to work with medics, and you get to look back at what you've done and review how medics have sort of performed in a constructive way and how you've performed in a constructive way. So it's good for that. I think they've said for the constructive kind of feedback aspect, and also it kind of puts you, I think, under the kind of circumstances and pressure that you will get when you're an actual pharmacist. And I think you do need to have that, because if not, when you go in, I know the first few weeks, you feel that pressure. So it is good, I think, from what they've said. I don't know whether Lucy did hers.
Yeah, did you do one, Lucy?
No,
got cancelled as well, unfortunately. Well, we've now got a plan in place to do these things going forward, but obviously that came at just the wrong time. But yes, it's a good opportunity to practice these things in a safe environment where the patient is actually a mannequin, so you can't do them any harm, which is really good. Excellent. So the next question is again around the regional training and how your knowledge will be tested. Do you have regular monthly tests or online tests to do at home? And I think there's quite a mixture of this sort of thing through the 3 different elements of your pre-reg training in the East Midlands. So in the regional training, we have 2 websites to support it, the DMU one and the Buttercups one. They both have practice questions on, workbooks. The Buttercups one has got workbook on every chapter of the BNF and associated questions with that. And then there's also various quizzes and tests that go through the clinical elements, which I'll talk about in a moment. So I think there's a mixture of things, and also we give you lots of resources that you can self-test as well. So you can identify any areas that you think you maybe need a bit more help with, maybe calculations, and we can direct you to resources that you can then access some more practice questions that way. Okay. Now we mentioned the C word earlier. So the next question was around whether COVID has affected the training this year and will it affect 2021 as well. So I think we could hear from some comments from Johnny and Lucy that it did affect some aspects of training last year, such as the simulation suite, and we had our last few training sessions virtually rather than face-to-face. And as a result, we have had to put this year's training, so what Hannah is going through, we've had to do that in a blended approach. So some of it will be virtual, some of it will be face-to-face, and some of it will be self-directed learning. Hannah, could I just ask you how you're finding it so far?
Yeah, so I only started my pre-reg a couple of months ago. And we have had a few regional training days already, and it's definitely been interesting. And there is a part of me that thinks it is a shame that we can't see each other face to face, because these training days involve all the different pre-regs from the different trusts, and it is quite nice to see everyone. But we do still get that interaction, even though we're online. And Amanda's organised the sessions very well, so we go into small groups and we can still get to know people from other trusts, so that's really good. And the other thing is that a lot for these sessions, we can work from home sometimes, and I felt like in the first few weeks when we had these sessions, it was really nice that we could work from home, because for me, this is the first time that I'm working full time, and it really hits you how tiring it is. So having one day in the week, which kind of breaks up the regular routine, where you can, you're obviously still working, but you can kind of just relax a little bit. I think that was like so beneficial and so helpful. So that was really good too. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are making sure that we are covering all of the same learning outcomes, just in a slightly different way, and obviously everything that the GPHC requires of us and pre-regs. So I'll just move on to then the clinical seminars, because we got asked about clinical teaching. And whilst there is clinical teaching within the regional programme, the majority of it is done through the clinical seminars. So I was going to ask Sandy to just talk us through that, because we've got a bit of a varied approach across the region for that.
So we deliver clinical seminars in the north and the south of the region, and rather than coming through Manda and the regional programme, they actually get coordinated by a trust in the north and also then a trust in the south. So depending where somebody does their pre-reg depends on which seminars they might attend. The seminars are delivered by specialist clinical pharmacists, so you're actually getting input, obviously sort of direct from people who are actually working with these patients. They happen over the course of the year, and the sort of, I suppose, the subjects and the content is defined a little bit by obviously the specialisms that we've got in the region. So what it does mean is, I suppose, if you're working in maybe a smaller hospital that doesn't have that specialism, you do then get the opportunity of obviously potentially hearing an expert speak from another trust. So those obviously happen, slightly different arrangements, as I say, in the north and south. This year they have been affected slightly by COVID. So in the past, the people in the north would have met together, and likewise in the south. So they're happening virtually this year. So people are giving obviously information with various slides, etc. And then actually they're doing live sessions, a bit like this, Q&A with the specialist pharmacist, so that people actually get opportunity to speak and obviously be able to ask the questions that they've got. I think the thing also to comment with these clinical teaching, they're probably above and beyond what's needed for the pre-reg year. So they're very helpful. They will help with the exam, but actually they're a little bit there also to help actually with band 6 and when people are newly qualified. So actually giving a little bit of exposure perhaps to clinical sort of scenarios that might not have been seen at university, but that we think may well be useful for people and their future careers. So I think those are probably most of the bits, they say. There's also, back to actually comment that Amanda made earlier, we also then do have things like buttercups and other resources that link clinically that also helps with the clinical teaching. I think I've covered most points. I don't know actually whether any of sort of Kate or Sophia, have I missed anything that you would want to add at this point?
No, I think that's covered everything. I mean, the main point is that sometimes the teaching may take place at your own hospital or at another hospital near you in the region, or as it has been the case this year, may take place virtually. And I was just going to ask Hannah if she had something to say on this.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a lot of people like online that make their own resources, like questions that you can sort of help with revision, which is really good, but they're not always accredited or reliable. So you can get a lot of pharmacists who might just do it in their own time. But by having these resources like the buttercups and the ones that the university provides for the pre-regs, you know that what the information that you're getting and the questions and the resources that you're using, that they're all reliable and accurate. So, and a lot of the times, if you're not affiliated like with a university for your pre-reg, you have to pay for these courses. So having it included in your pre-reg is like really, really good.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed by how much information there is out there. And that leads on quite nicely, actually, to some of the questions we're going to answer shortly. So thank you for that, Hannah. Now, Johnny and Lucy did their sessions face-to-face, but have you got anything you wanted to add about the clinical teaching?
I think the clinical teaching days are some of the best part and most supported parts of the year. Obviously, we had ours face-to-face, so it could be quite different to virtually, but it gives you that chance, if you've not had a specialty or a rotation, or you've not looked over that yet, it sort of gives you a good starting point for revision. So it's not covering everything you need to know for the exam or for future practice in that day, but it's giving you that starting point of these are the key things you need to know, and it sort of reminds you of where you might need to spend more time looking over. So I found them a really good basis for revision, because you know sort of what's expected of you, but then where you feel there's a gap in your knowledge and you can spend longer going over. So I think they're really worthwhile days and something you get lots out of.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of case studies, and you've got the opportunity to ask an expert in that area if you've got any questions. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to move on to some more questions about the whole programme overall, and this one we can spend perhaps a little more time on, was what sort of support can be given to ensure that pre-regs are on track, don't feel overwhelmed with the amount of work. So I was going to ask Johnny, first of all, if that's all right, what sort of support you got from the different parts of your pre-reg programme, and then people can chip in if needed.
Yes, I think support-wise, it varies in the different sort of places you are, but the bulk of the support is at your base trust where you're working. So for me here at Chesterfield, and I think the most important person for your support is your personal tutor, who is there throughout your year or you'll have a one, or maybe two, if your tutor leaves, someone replaces them, and that's all done approved with the GPHC. And they are the person who the GPHC mandates you should be meeting with on a sort of a defined basis, or every fortnight or whatever. And they are there to provide you with support in terms of potentially your knowledge clinically, but also the more pastoral side of support in terms of how you feel at work, and if you're stressed or whatever, or things like that. And particularly throughout sort of COVID period, which was quite a difficult period to be working in. Certainly, I found my personal tutor was really helpful in checking: are you okay? Is there any issue?
Oh, we seem to have lost Johnny there.
That you've got up on us regularly. Am I back now?
Yes.
Sorry, the internet wobbles a bit. And yeah, the pre-reg facilitators as well, the regional leads were checking as well. Are you happy? Have you got any issues you have? And we've certainly had at Chesterfield meetings on a sort of fairly sort of monthly basis with the regional lead, and sometimes if the tutors could attend as well, and we discuss the general programme, how things are going. So the bulk of that support is at your base trust, but obviously if there's something from a regional perspective in terms of the programme as a whole from DMU, there's chance to provide feedback after each of the sessions. There are usually representatives from the trust, 1, 2 or 3, I think, from the trust who are current pre-regs. I know I was one for last year, and I assume there'll be some for Hannah's year as well, that if you don't feel like you maybe talk to them first and they can feed things back or whatever. So there's lots of options. Of course, Manda is wonderful, and you can always talk to her if you've got anything about the regional programme, you've got a question about anything or anything like that. So there's support at lots of levels, from a trust level right through to regional. The only one thing I'd add is it's not just your tutor. You will work with lots of different pharmacists throughout the year, and they will support you throughout your rotation. You will have somebody usually who is a pharmacist that specialises in that area, so say the specialist orthopaedics pharmacist who's working there, who you will probably see on a fairly daily basis. And they'll support you through that rotation, be able to feedback potentially into that, and give you hints and tips on your knowledge and things like that.
Excellent. And also we do encourage the pre-regs to support each other. So all of the 8 trusts has got at least 3 pre-regs on each site. So you're not on your own. And we do encourage you to sort of set questions for each other, have learning sessions together. And we have a WhatsApp group for the whole region as well. So there's always somebody to ask. In terms of if you need more significant support, we hope that doesn't happen, but if you do, you can get support through the hospitals themselves, access to wellbeing and counselling, but also because you're a De Montfort University student, you have access to all of their resources and support systems as well, many of which can be accessed virtually or over the phone if you can't make it face-to-face. So you can be referred for life coaching or counselling or financial support. So I think basically, we've come across a lot of issues over the years that people have needed help with, and we've always managed to find support for them in one way or another. So thank you for that. I'll just move on to some of the more general questions as well that we've had. So the next one was, will there be a job for me as a newly qualified pharmacist? And I was going to pass that one on to Sophia to answer first of all.
Yeah, so I understand this might be worrying for some people. They're thinking, oh, what will I do after pre-reg? So first, we can be quite reassuring. Pharmacy in the NHS is an essential thing. And so will you be able to get a job somewhere in hospital in the region? While I can't use the word guarantee, but realistically, most people will have no trouble getting a job after their pre-reg. Will you be able to get a job at the same hospital that you did your pre-reg in? That's a little bit different, and that will depend on the trust that you're at, whether there's vacancies. So some trusts will have their band 6 jobs, so the jobs after pre-reg on like a fixed term contracts, and so there'll be a cycle where jobs will become available every year. And then some trusts will have a fixed pool of band sixes, and then you're waiting for somebody to leave for the next job to become available. And so there is that sort of variation in terms of, will there be a job available for you at the right time? And so the best thing for you to do is to find out how it works at the individual trust that you're interested in. Get in touch with the trust that you're hoping to preference highly, or to help you make those preferencing choices, to find out how it works there. If I can just say about something that we started quite recently in my trust, which is Derby, which we've started an automatic progression system where pre-regs are recruited onto permanent contracts. And then we do, as long as they meet certain criteria, they automatically after a year go up to band sixes, and then after 2 years they go up to band sevens. So that's something, if you want further information about that or any of the hospitals, do get in touch with us.
Yeah, thank you. I think what we will say is that we really do like to keep our own pre-regs in region. We've invested a lot of time and effort in you. We've got to know you. You've got to know us. And I do feel that it is a very friendly region from that point of view. So if we can keep you, we will. Excellent. I just wanted to go back to Hannah. The other Hannah has managed to join us, so I'd just like to introduce Hannah Mumbwe, who did a multi-sector place. Hi, Hannah. And that was with Kettering Hospital and also Queensway Medical Centre. So I particularly wanted to ask Hannah one of the questions we received, which was whether you should choose a multi-sector placement or not. Now, with how Oriel works is that any placement that is greater than 3 months is counted as a major placement. So when you go on to Oriel, if you want to look for somewhere that maybe has a split with a GP practice or a mental health hospital or a CCG or community, then you need to look at the number of placements and choose one that says 2 or 3 placements. That means that they are large placements, but within all the hospital programs, there are smaller placements, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, but Oriel only deals with the 3 month or more. So Hannah, if you just want to explain what you did and whether you think that the pros and cons of doing a multi-sector placement.
Yeah, so I did my placement, as Manda's already said, in a hospital and a GP. My hospital placement was 9 months and my GP placement was 3 months. I would definitely recommend someone to take it because you get to see a whole different side of pharmacy, especially GP, because I don't think I was exposed to GP during university. It was mostly just hospital or community. So you get to see a much different role of a pharmacist. And also it's very applicable. So for example, some of the things that you do in hospital, you can translate it into GP, and some of the things that you do in GP can be translated into hospital. Like discharge letters, because you write discharge letters in hospital and then you leave them. And then in GP, I was able to see what happens to those discharge letters. So I would definitely recommend for someone to do it. If you are unsure about what sector you want to work in, I think that pre-reg is a good opportunity to have a look at the different sectors.
Okay. Would you think there were any particular challenges to doing a multi-sector placement that people need to think about?
I would say definitely because your time is less in each sector. So for example, in hospital, because you're only there for 9 months and you still have competencies and standards to meet, but you have less time to do it. So that is something to bear in mind, and just definitely be on the ball when you're trying to complete your competencies, because you do have less time than everybody else who would have the traditional 12 months in one place.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Hannah. That's really helpful. And for 2021, we've actually got 5 different programs in the region that are either with a GP or we've got one that is with a mental health hospital as well as a GP. So that's a 3-way split Nottingham, I think that one is, if I'm right. No, that's Northampton. So yes, that's all on Oriel, and you can find those by searching e.g.do, so HEEGP, or by using the filters, and they will come up. And so you can filter for 2 or 3 placements if you wish. So thank you for that, Hannah. I'll just move up to some of the other questions we've been asked then. So following on from the what happens next that we talked about, and whether there's places available, we've had a question to ask whether all hospitals offer postgraduate diplomas. And I think this is a bit of an area of change going on at the moment. So I was going to hand over to Sandy, who can explain that a bit better than myself.
So, as it stands at the moment, most hospitals, I think all hospitals in the region, are offering a diploma. Most offer them through to Montfort, but I think Chesterfield do diploma through Keene, I believe. Yeah, Johnny's nodding, so yes. So that's how the situation's been for a number of years. But we're seeing, obviously, advent of changes in education. So we're seeing, obviously, introduction of foundation training, early days, but we think that that potentially, obviously, may affect diploma as we go forward. So what I think I would say to people at the minute is that as it stands today, diploma is offered. We're not quite sure what obviously the next couple of years will bring, but I think what I would say is rest assured there's always going to be training following the pre-reg year. So I would expect there will be some shape or form of training that will happen 1-2 years post-qualification, but it's probably a little bit premature to say what that might be. Sorry, I've just lost my lights. Sorry. Sorry, right, back. Yes. So yeah, watch this space. But I think that I would reassure people that there will be training in the years sort of 1 and 2 following qualification.
Yeah, excellent. I think Johnny wanted to add something to that.
It was only to say that at Chesterfield, ours is not offered to DMU. It's now going to be, I think, the first batch will go through Bradford.
Oh, Bradford,
so,
sorry.
That's the only Bradford. Yeah, that's the only change now, and I think we will probably be doing that at some point when COVID's sort of itself out.
No, thank you. And I think that the main point, as Sandy made, is that there will be some post-qualification training offered, because it is essential in order to sort of learn how those jobs really work and experience those specialisms, because you can only just touch the surface in your pre-reg year. So whatever is offered will be as good as, if not better, actually, than what is currently on offer. So watch this space for that. And that sort of leads on to another, when we were asked about how COVID has affected the current year and the year before, but actually going forward, we are, taking into account all of the changes that are going on, and there are also some changes proposed by the GPHC and Health Education England going forward, and we will need to take all of these into account for what is offered for 2021. So you may well have heard that it's going to be called a foundation year rather than a pre-registration year. And again, I think the same principle applies, that the training will be as good as, but probably much, much better than what is currently offered, because we're going to have a much more sort of a national approach and a revision of what is required by the General Pharmaceutical Council and Health Education England, in order to make sure that the pharmacists that are coming out of the system going forward are as equipped as much as possible for the job that that pharmacy is evolving into. Okay, so I hope that helps. Yep. So we also got asked as well. I'm just going to one of the live questions. Is whether a pre-reg in hospital can find a job in community once qualified, or vice versa, and how easy is it to swap over? Have I got someone who'd like to answer that one for me?
I can make some comments.
Sandy? Yeah, thank you.
Over the years, we have certainly taken a lot of community pharmacists in as band sixes. So basically people who have done a pre-reg in community and then either they've come to us straight following their pre-reg there, or some have perhaps worked a year or two in community and then made the swap. So it's something we do. I know that all hospitals actually in the region will take, perhaps some more than others, but I know certainly, actually, Kate's nodding, I know Lincoln has taken a lot from community as well over the years. What you'll find is that we will be aware of somebody's background when they come perhaps from the community sector, so chances are there'll be probably a little bit more training to get them aware of the perhaps the areas that they've not seen as a pre-reg, so things like perhaps working on a ward. But the thing to remember is people that come from community will have other advantages that those people in hospital won't have. So actually, perhaps standing on their own 2 feet, acting perhaps more sort of autonomously, will be things that they might be more used to. So there's pros and cons, but can you make the swap? Yes, ultimately you can. And again, I would actually probably speak to each individual trust because you will probably see slight differences, but I know people certainly have taken from community across the board.
Yeah, and I think that ties in with sort of a common myth, I think, that we often get asked about, is whether it's better to do your training, your pre-reg year in hospital than in community. You know, do you get better training? Are you more likely to pass the exam? Sophia, do you want to answer that one for us?
So you were just asking about whether you get better training in community.
Yeah. Are you more likely to pass the exam if you do a hospital pre-reg? We've been asked.
Yeah, so it's a difficult question to answer because obviously we do get different pre-reggers who are interested in hospital as opposed to community. And so just looking at the statistics, the pass rate in hospital on face value does look higher. But it is worth just remembering that we do get a lot more applications into hospital, and so we are able to select different candidates. Overall though, across the region, we do all give excellent training. We do give you that support with clinical seminars. We organise our programmes looking at the assessment framework in mind, so that we're making sure that you know, whilst we're not training you on every section of the framework, that we're giving you options to ensure that you've got the skills and knowledge to meet those requirements of the framework in hospital. I can't comment on what community do because I haven't actually worked there, but I can reassure people who are looking at applying to hospital that we do give you good training, and that will obviously help you towards the exam.
Yeah. Anything more to add? No. I think what I was going to add to that. Sorry, go on. Sorry.
If you're looking to be a community pharmacist long term, I have friends that did their pre-reg in community pharmacies and now working in community pharmacy, and that's perfect for them. So I think it's not just about the exam here, it's about what you want to do long term as well. So it is that, whereas I did my pre-reg in a hospital because I wanted to be a hospital pharmacist. So it's sort of like the exam is one part of it, but it's what you want to do long term. So the training in hospital will prepare you more for hospital pharmacy. So if you're going to come and do training in hospital, but ultimately want to be a community pharmacist, that will still be a big switch as well. I think that's.
Yeah, so I would agree. I think, as Sandy said, it is possible to switch between the sectors, but you would need additional training to get up to speed. I would say also the training that you get in both sectors, you develop the same skills. You know, it's the same skills that you need, but the environment and the context is very, very different. So if you want to be a community pharmacist, then I would recommend you do your training in community, because that is the best training for a career going forward, and vice versa. And it isn't just, like I say, about passing the exam. And the training to you know, we're not training you to pass the exam, we're training you to be competent professionals going forward and give you the support to be the best pharmacist you can be. Okay, so I hope that helps some people decide if you're sitting on the fence of which way to go. Okay, or choose a multi-sector placement. There are a few that are hospital and community, but most of them are either community or hospital with a GP practice at the moment. But they're all on Oriel for you to look at. Okay, we've had a question through on the live stream about the strengths and weaknesses of pre-regs at the beginning of training. It's up on screen now. What would you advise fourth years to do to prepare for your pre-reg year? So Hannah's going to answer that one for us, I think.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this was me literally a few months ago. And I think some of the strengths that you have is, well, it's kind of dependent on the person, but if you go into your pre-reg with a really open, enthusiastic mindset, then that's kind of the best thing that you can have. And it's definitely the best way to start your placement. Every university teaches pharmacy differently, so the kinds of skills and knowledge that you'll have from your university before you start your pre-reg will vary depending on the uni. However, from when you do your exams in final year to when you start your pre-reg in that summer, you may feel like you've forgotten a lot, but actually once you start working and start applying your clinical knowledge, a lot of the information will come back to you. So another strength is having that information in your head from your degree already. In terms of weaknesses, as I mentioned, every university is different. So there might be areas that you haven't come across or you haven't practiced much at university, and then you come into this workplace and you have to sort of learn from scratch. And I can't comment on all the different trusts, but the way that Leicester's works is for the first couple of months, you're just doing the training, the basic skills for hospital pharmacists, which I found is really beneficial because it means that all of us pre-reggers from different unis are all on the same level, and we can all help each other out. And it just gives you like a good base to start before you start going on towards and doing more clinical practice. So in terms of how you can prepare beforehand, I would say don't study loads and loads and loads, because I think it's a good time to relax, like in that summer just before, and you're going to be working really hard for the year, so like take a break, but also, and like I said, a lot of the information will come back to you when you start working, but one thing that you can do is closer to the time, so like in July, there's a lot of online webinars that take place for pre-regs that are just about to start, so they're really good in kind of giving advice on like what competencies are and what to expect, and kind of practical things on how to prepare. And I have a blog on Instagram, Pharma Drama. You can see my posts on that. No, but seriously, if you see like other people who have done the pre-reg, they're obviously going to have the best understanding of it and can give the best tips. So definitely sort of tune into webinars and posts about it. And also, I'd say if you can get work experience in a pharmacy, especially with the sort of dispensing process, I would say that's really good. So I hadn't worked in a pharmacy beforehand, and so when I started learning how to dispense, I was quite overwhelmed. Like, oh my gosh, what is all of this stuff? So I definitely think if you've dispensed before, even if it's in a community pharmacy, that's going to give you like a really good sort of basis on an experience. So when you do get into the hospital, you've kind of got a bit of background understanding. So if you can get work experience, that would be good. And also kind of just getting into the mental headspace and like planning out how you're going to not just do your work, but also outside of work, how you're going to live. Because like I mentioned before, this is my first full-time job. So for the first few weeks, I was coming home really tired every single day. And I was like, I can't even make lunch for tomorrow because I'm so tired. So just being able to prepare your weeks and plan, okay, on this evening, I'm going to prepare lunch for the rest of the week. On this day, I'm going to write up my competencies, my evidences, and kind of just getting into that kind of mental headspace. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. I think Johnny had something he wanted to add on to that at the end.
Yeah, I agree with it. Definitely you don't study everything you need at university. It will come back to you. And if you don't know the answer to something, no one will go, you should know that. or whatever. I'm known for being asking evil questions, but I don't expect the pre-regs who are shadowing me to know the answer. It's about, there should be, and the pharmacist you work with will encourage your knowledge through asking you questions. If you don't know the answer, that's fine. It is about preparing yourself for going out to work every day for 5 days a week and some weekends potentially. So that is part of the preparation as well. And I'd say the biggest strength you can do is to say go into it enthusiastically, go into it to get to know the people you work with and be positive, be a good person to work with. And I think you'll get a lot more out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of it, because then people
seems to be having a few problems with Johnny's internet there, but I think we got the message there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Yeah. Do any of our tutors have anything to add there? Because someone's also asked on a similar line, what can I do to get ready for my pre-reg year?
So from my point of view, I'd say that actually in your 4th year, the most important thing you can do is just to get through your university degree and finish 4th year. Don't worry about pre-reg. You've got your place. Let us do the worrying about pre-reg for now. So from a sort of training provider's point of view, we don't expect you to come having done loads and loads of clinical research before you come. We don't expect you to have, while some people will have read things about the GPHC pre-reg programme, it's not a necessity, and your individual training site where you're going to be working will tell you what they need you to do before you come. And I'd absolutely agree with the practical advice that Hannah said. So think about how you're going to get to work. Make sure you're going to get there on time on your first day if you can. Think about where you're going to live, because you don't want to be trying to move house and sort all these things out at the same time as starting your pre-reg. So during your 4th year, concentrate on just your university degree and finishing that off. And then as it comes to nearer your start of your placement, get in touch with the training site that you're going to be at, and they will advise you if there's anything they need you to do.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. Thank you. So I just wanted to finish off, obviously the people listening to this want to know how best to preference, what to put into their preferences to have the best chance of getting a hospital placement. I'm also the national lead for the regional lead for the national recruitment scheme. So I get asked this question a lot. And I think the main thing is to decide which hospitals and other places that you would like to go to, and then just put them in the order that you'd like to go to them in. There's no game around Oriel. You will get sort of the highest place on the list that you're eligible for. So just genuinely just put them in the order that you would like to go to them in. Don't include anywhere that you can't travel to, or that you don't really want to go to. And always have a backup plan. So always have some community placements in there, or some multi-sector placements in there as well. And preference as many places as you can, just so that you don't miss out on a placement because you haven't put enough in the box. And actually that's the main problem, that we've seen people not put enough places in their preference boxes. Also, look at the information on Oriel. There's a short description for each of the places on there, but there's more information on those websites that we're going to put up at the end as well. So you can do your research and try and find out a little bit more about the places and whether they would suit you. Just checking, we've got another live question there. Right. Yes, we've had a few questions about preparing for the interviews, but there are no interviews this year for the 2021 cohort. They've had to be cancelled because of the pandemic. So what we're doing is extrapolating the results from the situational judgment tests in order to rank people, because we know there's a very close correlation with the people that do well in the SJTs do well in the multiple mini interviews. So that's been a national decision. It's not ideal, but it's how we're dealing with the situation at the moment. So those of you who are looking for a place for 2021, you just have to do the SJTs and the numeracy test. We can't give advice in this forum on how to prepare for those, but your universities will be able to give you some support on that. And there's information on the National Recruitment Scheme website as well. Okay, so I think all that remains is for me to say a huge thank you to our panel members today. I'm hoping that everyone was listening has found that really, really helpful. If you want more information, please do contact us. We will be, by email. We will. We've got these links here that has contact details for all of the 8 hospitals. They can answer your questions. Maybe even arrange for you to have a chat with a current pre-reg or one of last year's pre-regs about what it's really like to work at those places. So just to finish, I wish you all the very best of luck with your ORIOL process and with your pre-reg year and with your career going forward. Thank you.